your mind clears. A breath in, it fills us with the particles, the smells, and the nuances of our surroundings. And a breath out allows us to let the outside go, bringing us back to center, to ourselves. All day, every day, we breathe in and we breathe out without thinking as we go about the mundane business of our lives. Also involuntary, a heartbeat. Place your hand so you can feel it. For real, I can see you. The rhythmic beat. The internal mechanical system that is beyond our reach, but responsible for pumping the lifeblood that keeps us moving. The power of the heart is also a deeply reaching metaphor. Deep feelings touch the heart. Anxiety makes our hearts race. Love makes our heart go all aflutter, while fear makes our heart skip a beat. We reach out to one another heart to heart, and the rabbis teach that the heart is the seat of emotion. Over the last few weeks, we have watched state governments in Alabama, Louisiana, and Georgia, among others, sign restrictive anti-abortion measures criminalizing people, women, who make the decision to terminate a pregnancy after the detection of a fetal heartbeat, with very limited exceptions. They have ruled that to end a pregnancy at this very early sign of development, usually at around 6 weeks gestation, which, by the way, is usually 2 weeks or so after a positive home pregnancy test. They've ruled that this is not just immoral, but a crime. These laws are sometimes called heartbeat bills, sometimes called abortion bans. The one in Georgia is called the Life Act, standing for Living Infants, Fairness, and Equality. But regardless of how we refer to them, they always refer to setting legal limits on when a person, a woman, can seek termination of an existing pregnancy. And before I go on, my heart is beating, I am nervous, guys. Before I go on, I want to say that I know right now I am wading into potentially uncomfortable territory. And I know that we might not all agree on the best course of action and the limits and the lengths of governmental policy around reproductive rights. And I am not seeking to impose my opinion tonight, though I recognize that I do have one. And for this reason, I am going to choose my words tonight, as you know I always do, with painstaking intention. And I hope that we can learn together from centuries of Jewish teaching and explore a perspective on this rising tide of legislation that is solidly rooted in our reform movement of American Judaism. I hope to carefully and respectfully open up a conversation that might be uncomfortable, but that we are morally and Jewishly obligated to begin. In the story of creation, in the second chapter of Genesis, God forms Adam out of the dust of the earth. Vayipach ve'apav nishmat chayim, vayehi ha'adam lenefesh chaya. And God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and Adam became a living soul. It is the act of breathing, the presence of that nefesh that gives him life, that makes Adam the first human. The rabbis come back to this word nefesh, this soul breath, when they examine the difficulties of birth and pregnancy in the Mishnah. In a discussion of a dangerous pregnancy, they determined that if the mother is having a maksha leleid, trouble giving birth, and the fetus is still in the womb, that the pregnancy should be terminated for the sake of the mother. However, if the head of the infant has emerged, it becomes a case of nefesh mipnei nefesh, choosing one soul over another. In other words, one may not harm the child whose head has emerged because it has become a nefesh, a being with the same soul breath that gave Adam life. From this point on in Jewish tradition, the rabbis are quite clear that the life of the mother is paramount until the baby is born. What is less clear, both rabbinically and in modern times, is what situations qualify as a legitimate threat to the life of the mother. In other words, does maksha lelaid, trouble giving birth, just mean physical difficulty? Does this euphemistic trouble include her mental health or her financial health or the way that she became pregnant? Does it account for cases of trauma? Does maksha lelaid apply to those who are too young or not ready? Does it describe a pregnancy for a much-wanted baby with a fatal or painful prognosis? Does maksha lelaid account for every heartbreak, every fear, every gut-wrenching reality that informs so many stories of abortion? These cases are too detailed. These questions are too personal, and these situations are too enmeshed in the uniqueness of souls and heartbeats of the living for any sort of clear-cut, overarching, always kind of answer. The rabbinic system of law leaves space for these questions, and the rabbis understand that a case-by-case approach is necessary. Jewish law is not a definitive code, but a record of sagely conversations among people who rarely agree. And even today, we offer new explanations and interpretations. Our tradition upholds the holiness of machloket, of an argument for the sake of heaven, seeing truth in multiple opinions and allowances for multiple answers. Jewish law knows that one ruling does not answer every question, and indeed, most questions are exceptions to the rule. And as Reform Jews, we take Jewish tradition, this long history of question and answer and question again, and we hold it in our own hands. We call this the principle of informed choice. It is the acknowledgement that each one of us gets to decide how Jewish tradition will guide our lives, both in our most mundane moments and in the sharpest, most unexpected turns of our individual journeys. We have rabbis and we have teachers to walk beside us as we interpret the teachings of tradition for the challenges of today. Reform Judaism upholds the importance of interpreting moral and religious questions for ourselves in all areas of our lives. And the inherent nature of the question on the table here, the question of how we define an independent life and the moment that it begins, this is a moral and religious question. It is a question as old as the Torah, a question first answered with Adam's first breath, and still open to Jewish interpretation today. The Reform movement is unwavering in its approach to this recent wave of heartbeat bills and abortion bans. Women should be able to make decisions about their reproductive health that is aligned with and respectful to the open-ended nature of Jewish tradition. In a statement issued by the Women's Rabbinic Network, my colleagues wrote, "The ability God gave to women to carry potential life comes with power and responsibility. And we trust women to carry out the blessings and the questions that come with this extraordinary capacity. Legislation which diminishes women's right to choose thereby questions women's ability to be moral, ethical, loving, and thoughtful about life and its potential. This is to say that Jewish tradition recognizes the individual circumstance of every woman, and it expects women, in consultation with their personal support systems, to make the right choices for their bodies and their lives." Those of you who have gotten to know me over the past year may have noticed by now that I am being uncharacteristically impersonal in an effort to not push a personal agenda. I haven't even told any stories. However, you also know me by now, and you know by now that every word I say as a mother. I am a mother who has felt her babies kick from the inside and who has listened to their tiny fetal heart buds beat in a darkened ultrasound room. And I say this as a mother who has felt the difference between carrying my children in my womb and carrying them in my arms. And I say this as a mother who remembers the moments that they took their first soul breath and cried those first tiny cries and lived their first moments as human beings who are separate from me. And I say this as a mother who has made the choice to mold my life and my goals and, to be honest, the wholeness of my being around understanding where I end and where my children begin. And I got to choose to be their mom. And my religion supported this choice. And my understanding of God's role in my life supported this choice. And I am grateful every day that I made this choice. I know, I made it personal. But as a mother, it is personal. Though it happens in the public eye, bearing children is intensely personal. Notice your breath. Notice the way that the air fills your lungs. Let it out and feel the relief of that release before starting all over again. Put your hand on your heart and offer a small prayer of thanks for its steady and steadfast beat. Life requires both, the pulse of our heart and the pull of our lungs. And this answer is not in a law book, but in our bodies. It's not a bill, but a beat and a breath that work to define our lives with heart and with soul. I haven't yet mentioned this week's Parsha. The final chapter of the book of Leviticus, Bechukotai, gives us a list of blessings and an even longer list of curses. The curses, punishments for denying God, are gory and upsetting to read. We often refer to this parsha as the tochacha, or the rebuke. Tradition teaches that rebuke, the act of expressing disapproval or calling out wrongs, can be a mitzvah, an obligation. And Bechukotai is not shy about calling out the people who misinterpret God's commands. It is time for us to fulfill the mitzvah of rebuke. Morality is not a question for legislators. Heartbeat bills and abortion bans do not offer us, American Reform Jews, the religious freedom promised to us in the Constitution and reaffirmed by the Supreme Court. Our religion is clear in its intentional and exacting ambiguity. Until a baby takes that first breath, each situation is wholly individual and rests solely in the hands of a mother, her doctor, and her God, because it is personal for her. Each of us here is blessed with the gift of breath, which we can use to raise our voices, and we are blessed with the gift of heart, which seats our compassion and concern. And we define our lives by the way that we use these gifts. May we do so when it's uncomfortable. May we do so when it's personal. And may we live our lives guided by the holy words of Torah that we are empowered to choose again and again and again. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.